Hello, everybody. Here we are at another interview on the Art of Intervention Project Summit. And again, each interview is unique in its own way. And today is definitely going to be a great interview with a wonderful topic. And so we have Angela right now, and she's coming to us from, I think, Kansas City. Is that where we are right now?
Kansas City, like I say, America's best kept secret.
Yeah, it is a beautiful place. I have a lot of friends that live in Kansas City. I'm kind of a Midwest boy myself, but well, again, I'm glad we're able to chat. Can you tell people a little bit like who you are or what you do?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a long journey. I am an entrepreneur at heart. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm the host of the nationally ranked Addiction Unlimited podcast. I just made number one on a list of the top 32. I think they did
Woohoo!
32 podcasts for 2020, which is awesome. I'm also an interventionist, a coach, and I own a sober living company called Kansas City Recovery.
Oh, well, you and I are definitely in some of the same camps, except for the sober living community. But there's plans for that in the future here in Colorado. But that's
Nice.
great, and I know that you have obviously had a story that has led you into that. But first, I want to say congrats as a fellow podcaster. Congrats on being number one, which is really cool. I'm gonna have to pick your brain
Thank
later on
you.
on what am I not doing right. So, but good stuff. So somehow you got into this world that says, I want to help people because I struggled. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been sober. What am I, 14 and a half now? And it was such an incredible journey. I think in many ways I have a very uncommon story in that I quit drinking. I was really finished from the moment I made the decision and committed. Like I was really finished drinking. I didn't think about drinking after that. I didn't have cravings. It was not difficult for me. Like I was done with it. It was my number one enemy, and I just wanted to stay away from it. And that's what I did. I just focused all of my energy on my new life and figuring out how I was going to live and have fun and be a productive human.
Yeah. And did you have any stints along your using days that you like got clean for a little while and thought like I might be done and then went back out? Or just kind of what was that like for you? Did you just get to the point you're like, I'm done, I'm out, peace?
Well, listen, I would love to make it seem that simple, but but it never is. No, you know what? I had a couple of times where I took breaks, right, which is super common. I'm sure you hear this in your work as much as I do. I had a couple of those moments that I was like, you know what? I just need to take a step back. And the first time I quit for 30 days, neither time did I quit with the intention of quitting. It really was just taking a break. But the second time I quit for 60 days. And at that point, I was pretty clear I needed to quit forever. Like I really understood I had a problem at that stage of the game. But much like everybody else, I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how to really commit. And I just wasn't ready, right? I had to have some pretty tragic consequences to get me to make that commitment.
Yeah, the consequences are blessings in disguise when we're open to observing them in that way. And so 14 and a half years ago, life changed quite a bit. What were things like in like your family and relationship world because of your using?
Well, my family was okay, but only because I really shielded them from everything. My family did not know. They knew that I drank. They did not know nearly to the extent that I drank. And they never knew any time I had been arrested. They never knew when I had been to the hospital. They didn't know any of that stuff until I got sober. So those relationships were fine. But I had been on my own and had lived in Los Angeles for many, many, many years. So they were just naturally kind of protected from a lot of it too. They just didn't have a front row seat.
Yeah, and a lot of times when families reach out, especially in our world of doing interventions and coaching and stuff, it's typically worse than what everyone thinks it really is. And then they hear these stories later, and I kind of feel like I'm talking to myself in female form as you're telling your story because it's like there's so much similarities in that. It's really kind of crazy. And
Yeah.
but you found recovery, you found sobriety. What was that like in the beginning to start experiencing this newness?
I was in such gratitude, to be honest. I was I was so grateful to finally have the courage to walk away from my drinking life because I was just exhausted. I mean, I hated myself. I hated my life. I was angry every single day that I opened my eyes and realized I was still alive. It was miserable. It was really an awful way to live. And much like many other alcoholics for sure, I had that double life, right? There were not a lot of people in the outside world that really understood how much pain I was in and really how much I was drinking. So I was the typical person that, I always made sure that I looked pretty on the outside, hair done, makeup on, I wore the right clothes, I lived in the right zip code, I drove the right car. I created that outside picture for everyone, and it was exhausting. So by the time it was time to get sober, I was just grateful. I was the first day I woke up, I knew that it was the last night that I was going to drink. The night before, I knew I was not drinking ever again. And when I woke up that morning, it was a Saturday morning, and the first thought that went through my head was, "Thank God that's over."
Mm. Yeah. And that community piece, I'm sure, was huge as well. And I love what you say in your kind of, why do you love to help other people? And you talk about, you started seeing this person inside of you that wasn't really what you believed you were like, but you're like, wow, I'm actually a pretty great person.
Yeah, and how crazy is that to recognize that too? I thought when I got to 12 steps, I thought I was such a horrible human. I was such a piece of garbage. I spent years just lying to people and manipulating people, and I didn't realize in the moment that that's what I was doing, but I was a master manipulator like every other person with addiction. And I used people for many reasons, companionship, to have people to drink with, whatever. And I just was an empty soul, honestly. And once I started to grow up and I started learning about service work, and I had a sponsor that was absolutely the perfect fit for me and changed my life. And once I was learning how to do the most basic things like be honest, and which then in turn obviously makes you feel good about yourself. And then I started making other good decisions, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I could do this, you know? And the other part of it too is like, man, if I can do this, like really anybody can do this. If I can put it together, anybody can.
And I'm sure that is great in the coaching and stuff you do with people too, as they kind of get to know you a little bit in your coaching realm. But I know there's a word that you like to talk about because it's really important to address in recovery, positive, negative, however people look at it. But there's this word called relapse, and I'd love to talk a little about your kind of passion behind that word.
Well, it's fascinating because I hear people make statements all the time like, I hope that doesn't happen to me. And I'm always like, you hope? Like, what does that even mean? Like, I hope somebody gives me $10 million. Like hoping is not how you do it. Like you make a decision and then you commit to that decision. That's how you don't relapse, and I just got really passionate about this because there's no question, once alcohol or any substance really, once it is in my body, I don't have any control. I'm truly powerless in that moment, right? I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to be like, what my behavior is going to be, where I'm going to end up. I don't know how many days I'm going to drink. Like it's all unknown. But when I have a period of sobriety and the alcohol has left my body, I'm through withdrawal, right? And I'm getting in that little piece where the fog starts to lift a bit. At that point, we are regaining control of our decisions and of our thoughts. And there's a lot of responsibility in that. And relapse starts long before a drink ever ends up in your hand or substance, whatever your thing is. Relapse is a thought process that typically people are kind of nurturing for weeks and sometimes months before they actually end up doing drugs or drinking.
And in that journey that people go through with this, as you're talking about, happens way before. A lot of that's, would you agree, is kind of based on their kind of mental and spiritual conditioning prior to that moment of consumption?
Well, I think it's getting caught up in, I always say, don't spend too much time in the problem. I really want people to spend time in the solution, right? So if I'm thinking about a drink or I'm craving a drink, if I sit around and obsess about my craving for a drink, what the heck do you think is going to happen? I'm going to end up getting a drink. I want you to sit down and obsess about the solution. Obsess about all the other things that you can do and how you can spend your time and the choices that you can make that aren't getting a drink. Like, obsess about the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, I like to call those recovery triggers, right? They're kind of triggers for recovery instead of like relapse prevention for a
Mhm.
lot of people. So I want to connect with the families here a minute. And how would you kind of talk to them of this kind of lingo and language of encouraging versus shaming and those things as people are on their own journey, along with the family healing from the loved one that was suffering too?
There's so many challenges with the family because they really don't understand. I think there's so much pain there, and usually years of pain, and families are exhausted and they don't know what to do. And the problem is we speak a different language. I've been so successful as an interventionist because I speak addict fluently, and it is a different language. It's a different mode of communication. And and families do not speak addict. They just don't. It doesn't matter how much you love the person, how much you want them to get better, you don't speak the same language. And I think the greatest thing you can do is stick with I statements. I feel this way, not you made me feel this way, or you did this, so I did this, or you said that, so I felt this way. No, it is, you know what, that was really difficult for me, or I felt really powerless in that moment. I didn't know how to help. You just want to stay away from blaming and shaming kind of statements and speak from your own experience. Like, if I have somebody in sober living, I just had this conversation the other day and I knew he wasn't being honest. Instead of saying, you're lying, I said, I'm having a hard time believing that. Right? It takes him out of the equation entirely. And I'm speaking in my experience. I'm having a hard time believing it. It's just that simple.
Yeah, it all is the way that you kind of frame things to kind of get to the same solution. And in your world, again, you do interventions, you deal with so many families and individuals, and coaching, you're dealing with individuals, and then sober living. So you have it from a lot of different angles, from personal experience and a lot of those things as well. So what do you say to kind of the person that they're in that space and you can kind of tell that maybe you're in kind of relapse mode? How do you check in with them where it encourages them to check in with themselves?
So the first thing I always work on with clients for sure is the self-honesty piece, because you can lie to everyone on the planet, but you cannot lie to yourself. So you have to really be willing to be honest with yourself, not talk yourself out of things, not convince yourself you're not experiencing difficulties that you are. Like, really get honest, because then you have to make decisions to protect yourself. And when I say relapse is a choice, I say that because of all the choices you have to make when you're going down that path. So the very moment a drink sounds good to you, you need to be communicating about that. It doesn't have to be a big dramatic ordeal, but you need to be reaching out to somebody going, gosh, you know what? I thought about a drink today. It was really weird. It only lasted 4 seconds. It was really out of the blue, but you need to tell somebody. You've got to talk about that stuff. And from that point, if you're not protecting yourself and you let those thoughts continue to grow and get bigger, then they're going to grow and get bigger and they're going to become more frequent and you're going to continue to keep it to yourself. All of these are choices that we're making to not protect our sobriety. Then you have to really make the decision to drink. That's going to take some time. You're going to argue with yourself. You're going to argue with the committee, as I call it, right? The committee is going to be telling you, oh, you can have a drink. It's not that big a deal. It's just one. Nobody will even know. Like, you got to have those arguments. So you have to then make the decision to drink. Then you have to plan it and put together the time where you're going to do it. Do you have to hide it from people? Do you have to create some alone time? Right? All of these are choices. All of these are choices that are taking you down the road closer to the drink. Then you have to actually go get it. you have to go get the alcohol or the drugs or whatever it is. So there are a million little speed bumps down that relapse road where we can make different choices and do different things to keep from ever having that drink in our hand.
The process world of addiction is pretty insane. So what are some tips you give your people that says, hey, when you're thinking this, do this, or here's a suggestion? Give us like a few ideas that people can walk away with.
Sure. The thing I think is absolutely most important is you have to have a tribe of people that support you. And when I say that support you, I don't mean just people that know you're getting sober. I think it's really important for alcoholics to really have a tribe of other alcoholics because we understand each other on a very different level and we love and protect one another on a very different level because we're the only ones that really know what it's like to have that monster inside of you. So I think a tribe of people that understand not only are you not drinking and you're sober, but that understand how important that is to you, right? So it can be as simple as sending a text to somebody like, oh, just had a weird moment. Or you don't even have to say you had a weird moment. Send a text to somebody and just ask them how they're doing. Start a conversation that breaks that thought process so you're not obsessing about the craving or that thought about drinking. So I think tribe is number one, and there's a million ways to do that now with social media. It's like limitless how easily you can connect in all the different ways. Another thing I think is super important is to know your times that are going to be more challenging, right? For me, at the end, I usually started drinking about 8 p.m. I was a bartender and I would be at work, and when I got sober, as 8 p.m. would creep up, the committee would start talking like, oh, well, it's time to drink. It's 8 o'clock. This is when we usually drink. I had my little stash of Dixie cups and alcohol where I could go sneak my drinks. And knowing that that was a challenging time for me, I had to plug in some different things in that time. So I knew at 8 o'clock, I distracted myself 10 minutes at a time. If I was at work, I would wash dishes, I would start a conversation with somebody, whatever it took, 10 minutes at a time just to get through that moment. And then I could check in and see if the craving was still as strong. If it was, I'd do another 10 minutes.
And then it's like second nature, right? And I'm sure as people go through their own journey of recovery, it's, they're dealt with the substance abuse part, and then it comes into a relationship part, and then it comes into something else. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I have a gambling addiction too. But all the tools you're talking about are things they can apply no matter what is going on in their life, addiction or not, I believe.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've been a life coach for a long time. So a lot of the stuff I do, a lot of stuff I do with addiction is just life coach 101, you know?
Yeah, got to keep it simple. And those new
Yes.
tools, and again, as people start feeling better and all those kind of things, they move into this world of transformation, which obviously your life has been completely transformed. And I'm sure when people meet you, they're like, you used to be what? You used to have a problem
Yeah.
with that, and not even believable to a point. I'm sure you might get those looks sometimes.
Honestly, it's hard for me to believe sometimes, like it feels like a whole different person in a whole different life. And I honestly have gotten the opportunity to live two entirely different lifetimes in one life. And I never forget that. And I never forget to be grateful for that, because the truth is I never thought I would live to be 40. I thought that at some point I would go to sleep and I would just never wake up, because the amount of alcohol I consumed on a daily basis. I'm a very small person. I'm 5'2". I drank enough for at least 4 people, and I just thought I would die. I never thought I would even live past 40. I just turned 48 the other day. So
Well, congratulations on a birthday. I'll be 49 in a couple months, so we're um, there. So when you run into people, I'm curious. I haven't asked anyone this, but I'm just thinking of this as we're talking about. As you run into people in your past that see you now, do you get these double takes of like, huh, Angela?
well, I think everybody now can follow you on social media. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So I
yeah.
feel like there's not so much distance like there was when I was younger. When you didn't see somebody for a couple of years, you really hadn't seen them. Now it's like a lot of my old drinking friends definitely have followed my career. They pop up on my Facebook page. a couple of people have also gotten sober and are fans of the podcast and things like that. So that's pretty fun.
Cool. Where do people find your podcast, by the way?
You can find it online at addictionunlimited.com or on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, any podcast app, really, wherever you listen to them, we're there.
Yeah, I mean, social media is a great place for people to kind of catch up on, and it is. I think it's very humbling when people reach back out and say, "Hey, I need some help." And there you are. And so it's so important to have a presence with your podcast and everything that you're doing. So I feel blessed to have had you on the Art of Intervention project, and I hope people will tap into you for everything that you're doing. And it's cool when you can shoot them one of your podcast links and say, "Hey, family, listen to this one."
Yes, for sure. That was really why I started the podcast, was for exactly that reason. I didn't have any plans of it like actually having an audience.
Yeah, that was you sit there and think of your title though. Like I never thought about putting addiction actually in the title of my podcast show. It's just called Beyond the Bars Radio. And it was like, well, what's that about? But the tagline's there. So, there's a couple
Right.
things I'm working on for the future too. But it sounds like you're doing things right and awesome. And I'm grateful Kansas City has your network of help there with sober living. And just congratulations on all your success. And thanks for being a part of the show today.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you so much for thinking of me and having me on. This has been awesome to be a part of, and I really appreciate it.
You got it. Talk to you soon.